Let's go now to Greg Sheridan, because we're yet to fully, I think, realise the ramifications of yesterday's October 7 parliamentary motion. But it's clear that for the first time in a long time, bipartisanship has broken down between the two major parties of government when it comes to Israel. For more, I'm joined now, as I said, by foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Well, I think it shames us as a country, Greg, that we could not, our parliamentarians could not outright condemn the barbarity of October 7. And the Prime Minister appears cowed by his hard left caucus and fears from his pollsters about the Muslim vote in Sydney. I look at this and I wonder if it's too tough to say that the Prime Minister is a coward. I feel like he is a coward.
Well, Peter, it's great to be with you. This is a very sombre and sad subject. I think the government has been very cowardly in a collective sense. I don't want to personalise it on the Prime Minister too much. And to give them their due, they're willing to condemn the Hamas atrocities, okay, but the problem is they're so scared of saying anything that is unambiguously pro-Israel that they have to marry any condemnation of Hamas with some anti-Israel remark, some pro-Palestinian remark, some pro-ceasefire remark. Now, I think the government's been completely unrealistic in all this stuff. It's been very cowardly morally. It won't stand by our friend when our friend is in desperate trouble, being attacked. As Netanyahu said the other day, Israel is literally fighting a war on 7 fronts. All of these groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian government, the Houthis, they are all dedicated to the complete destruction of Israel and the extermination of Jews. How is Israel meant to compromise with that? And I think the Albanese government for the last 12 months has been destroying the bipartisan tradition in relation to Israel. It now has an overtly anti-Israel position, and in the effect of its behaviour at the United Nations, it either equates Israel morally with the terrorist organisations Hamas and Hezbollah, or it supports resolutions which only abuse Israel and don't even mention Hamas and Hezbollah. And I think there's a complete lack of decency and basic political values involved in this. And I think it's not just the Muslim vote they're scared of the Green vote. You know, Albanese is never going to lose his seat to a Liberal, but he might lose it to a Green. And so it's not just the Muslims, not all of whom will vote for Muslim Voice or anything. It's also the inner city left-wing Greens.
We've had this attrition, and you're quite right to point it out. It's not just obviously domestically that they're saying things that are at odds with decades of Labor history. There's been this attrition at the United Nations and comments made on the world stage by the Foreign Minister. But I think to get to the point in the Parliament where you have a motion that is meant to condemn a terror organisation and recognise an enormous loss of life on a particular day, that if parliamentarians, the two major parties of government in particular, if they cannot agree to that, I think we've absolutely crossed a Rubicon here, Greg.
Yeah, I think it is a very bad day. I agree. It's a very, very bad day. Now, I think the Albanese government is absolutely wrong on calling for an instant ceasefire. It's absolutely wrong on calling for an instant Palestinian state. Although they're so confused, just lately, even Penny Wong won't repeat her call for an instant Palestinian state, and Richard Marles wouldn't repeat the absurd call that Penny Wong made for that at the United Nations. But what Dutton and the opposition wanted was a simple, clear resolution just condemning the Hamas atrocities and expressing solidarity with the Israeli and other victims. And you can prosecute all the other politics, you know, any other hour of any other day. Yeah, you could do it tomorrow, or you could do it in another motion on the same day. Now, the government, in my view, is so attuned to the domestic politics and so scared of losing votes to the Greens that they wouldn't do that because it's seen to be too pro-Israel. It's like Penny Wong, the Foreign Minister, visiting Israel and then refusing to go to the sites of the massacres, as if she was ashamed to be standing side by side with Israeli victims of massacre. And this emanates ultimately from the the hideous left-wing view that there is something profoundly illegitimate and racist and wrong about the Israeli state itself. And that, of course, is at worst or at most a first cousin of direct anti-Semitism. I think the government has been all over the shop here. Today, Albanese said he's always had the same position as the Americans, but then he would not repeat the American statement that Israel had the right to make incursions into southern Lebanon to get rid of the Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure. So there are only two possibilities here. Either he was actually not across the detail of the recent statement that the American State Department had made, and sadly that's all too common with the Prime Minister, he's seldom across the detail. Or the other possibility is he's somehow or other trying to have a lend of us, trying to say to a Sky News audience, I'm exactly the same as the Americans, but not to have a soundbite where he says Israel is entitled to go into Lebanon because that'll hurt him with the Greens voters in the inner cities. And this constant duplicity, this constant sort of seeking refuge in smart aleck slogans which some Labor PR buffoon has made up. This is a terrible way to run a government. It's unworthy of an Australian government, and it's going to be bad politics in the end as well.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen, certainly in my experience in politics, that's 25 years now, a more poorly prepared Prime Minister. Now, either his office are giving him the briefings, he's not reading them, or they're not giving him the briefings and he's not then searching out himself to be across the detail before he fronts a camera. But this is a repeated circumstance, Greg.
Yeah, again and again and again. It's so strange. Now, he's not going to appreciate me saying this one speck, but I still really like Albo. He's a very decent guy and he has the makings of a decent Prime Minister. His instincts when he first came into government to try to move to the centre were very good. But because he comes from the left, he's never conceived of anything in national security terms. His office is not staffed with people who understand national security. And he was brought up thinking of the Israelis as villainous allies of the Americans, not as our democratic friends. So even when they try to move to the centre, they kind of can't do it. They haven't got the instincts, they haven't got the staff, they don't understand the issues. But then, just as you say, at the sheer technical level, like I'm no fan of Tony Burke, not a bit, and I think a lot of the stuff he says in Parliament is pretty disgraceful. But at least he's across his brief. The same with Jim Chalmers. I mean, they might be selling you moonshine, but they know what they're supposed to sell you. Whereas too often the Prime Minister, and I must say Richard Marles is guilty of this too, you take them 1 degree off their prepared talking points and they don't know what to say. They've just got to constantly retreat. They're like Kamala Harris. They just constantly retreat back into the prepared phrase, and that's as much as they can offer you.
We'll leave it there. You are well prepared though, Greg Sheridan, unlike the Prime Minister. Thanks for your time.